Okie dokie, we're all connected. So welcome to week 5 of the E in MEL. So this week is our second last week of this module before we get onto our lucky last module as well. As always, we've recorded the session today for those who cannot make it, and we'll only be recording the plenary and not the breakout groups. So the agenda for today, we are actually going to work together to select a broad set of methods for the Castlemaine 500 example, crowdsourcing from you today. So using the chat box, or feel free to unmute yourself as well. So Leanne and I will go through that process there. We'll then have a broad Q&A session with Leanne on the course content so far and anything that you still might be grappling with. So that's our agenda for today. So we're going to use Castlemaine 500 today as our example, and it will be good to help you in this session if you have done the activity already for this week, to get your workbook out and compare notes with us. But if you haven't done it, then this will be a really good opportunity to complete the task as well. So I'll share my screen, and the workbook has the existing key evaluation questions in there and the existing methods too. So just letting you know of that. So if you have those resources available, if you're able to locate them now, that would be great, as well as that the PDF of the choosing methods. That could be quite helpful too to help you with this discussion. So what I'll do is I'll share my screen now. And then we can start having a bit of a look at crowdsourcing those examples there. Does anyone have any questions before we start? There's only a small group of us here today, so happy for you to unmute if that's easier. No, I'll take that silence as a no, but feel free to jump in with any questions or queries that you might have during the session too. Hopefully you can see my screen. Is that big enough? Do I need to make it bigger? Leanne, can you see that clearly?
Yeah, and that's better for me if you're working off our laptop and not a bigger monitor.
Yep. Excellent. Okay. So I might even just zoom into the first criteria. And Leanne, you'll probably have to help me here looking at the comments if anyone's typing into the chat box. So I'll just walk through. So we've got the different criteria. We have effectiveness, sustainability, quality of implementation, and learning for Castlemaine 500, with 4 respective key evaluation questions and the related measures or sub-questions if they are sub-questions other than measures, and then what the existing data sources or data systems are for it. So we might start with the first KQ, key evaluation question, which is for effectiveness. How effective was the program in achieving its expected outcomes? And there are related measures in terms of reduction of energy use, the number of households who are adopting different types of energy, number of local businesses and partners offering new products or schemes, instances of effective leadership around energy reduction, and the proportion of participants who state they are likely to use what they learned. So based off this key evaluation question and the related measures, we have 2 existing data systems. So one is from the household energy bills from the electricity companies for each of the participating households. And it also collects information around the average energy use from nearby towns. And we also have tracking participation in workshops and household energy audits as well. So we've been tracking that along the way. So from your knowledge and from if you have done this activity already, what could possibly be some new methods or data collection systems that you could use? I can't see the chat, so if there's anything there, please do let me know. Does anyone have any ideas or any suggestions that they want to put up of potential new methods to assist in triangulating or collecting the data against this question? So I'm struggling to hear you a little bit. If you can speak up a little bit louder.
Can you hear?
Yes, that's
Yes.
better.
So maybe we need the investigation form to identify the level of energy they use before and after the investigation, something like that.
Okay. What do you mean by investigation form?
For example, how much energy do they, or how much money they have to pay for electricity every month, or before before investigation and after that.
Okay. Do you think that that would come from the data from the energy bills though?
Yes.
Yeah. So what is another way that we could collect information or data in terms of reducing energy usage or any of these other types of measures, sorry?
What kind of electricity item did they use in the household?
Yes.
For example, number of aircon, number of fan, or
Okay.
the number of people every month, every day in the family. For example, sometimes for some family, the husband go for business trip, so they absent. So maybe the number of people in the family will be reduced.
There's also some suggestions in the chat, Keisha, just letting you know.
Yeah, sure thing. Are you able to read them out to me, Leanne?
Participant observation,
Okay, yeah.
Ali suggested, and Esther suggested individual interviews.
That's great. And Ali, just a question there in terms of participant observation, would that be around the workshops in terms of people participating in the workshops? Is that what you were referring to?
Yes, just to see if that is really happening.
Great. Okay. Yeah, great suggestions. And I'm happy if, unless there are any other, there's nothing else coming through from the chat, Leanne, in terms of any other suggestions for that question?
No, I just wanted to go back to the recording number of people in the household. This sounds to me like a good opportunity to understand if it's actually related to less use, or just happens to be that there happens to be less people, and actually no less actual use, just happens to be less people. It's a good way of really understanding the extent of the change, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, distinguishing it.
Yeah. But you probably want to talk about that more when you talk about looking at the methodology as a whole. So I'm probably jumping ahead, Keisha. Sorry.
No, that's fine. No, good observation now. Okay, well, we might proceed to the next question. So this one's around sustainability. So how sustainable and enduring are the outcomes of the program likely to be? So that's about number of households reducing or continuing to reduce their electricity usage. So the related measures that we have here are that there are ongoing structures and or groups created that will continue after the project ends. That's a measure of what we would consider success there. And the existing data systems that Castlemaine 500 are using is tracking participation in workshops and household energy audits. So very similar to this one up here as well. So that's how they're going to measure if there are going to be ongoing structures and or groups created that will continue after the project ends. Can anyone think of any other new methods that you could use alongside this tracking to assist with finding out this information? What would be a good method here?
Noor has put in the chat, Keisha, self-assessment with a question mark.
Okay. Did you want to elaborate on that, Noah, if you're able to unmute yourself?
Yes.
Yeah.
As I understood, that's a qualitative data, and from the reference I can see here, self-assessment is the right method to do. Yes, that's
Yeah.
what I understood. Yeah.
So like participants are doing a self-assessment on what specifically?
What I meant is the one who conduct the survey or the research.
Okay, so the evaluators are doing a self-assessment, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
And what are they doing a self-assessment on?
Here, it's like it's a qualitative scale, and it's associated to the testing of the individual units of the household energy use.
So how will that give us information if there are ongoing structures or groups created after the project ends?
Okay. Okay, we can see the participant use low or high average energy.
Yeah, so we're looking here for instances that people are going to be continuing with reducing their energy after the program ends. So should it be an evaluator self-assessment there, or is it more participants are doing a self-assessment?
So it's more on the participant, not yet. Yeah. It's more on the participant.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Noor.
Keisha, Ani has put a good suggestion forward. Focus group discussion with groups created to identify the level of commitment after the program ends and factors affecting those commitments.
Yeah, great. That's a good one, Ani, too. Thank you. Sorry, just typing away.
Yeah, for level of commitment, yeah. And factors affecting the commitments, yeah. So to really understand what might affecting with an A in this instance.
Okay.
Yeah. What might affect people's ability to commit or not? Like what? Yeah. I believe that's what she means. Yes.
Yeah, I guess, you know, if they're relocating to another town, you know, moving into a new house and trying to figure out the energy usage of that new location, you know, that could be a factor kind of affecting that commitment, I guess. That's great. Okay, so the next one's around quality of implementation. So the key evaluation question being, how effective was our engagement with different households? So that is internally looking, the program team saying, how good were we engaging with those different households that we wanted to engage with? So the measures here are the number of residents participating in the leadership program, the number of households in workshops disaggregated by renters or homeowners, and comparing the two. Number of households participating in household audits disaggregated by renters versus homeowners as well. And engagement with partners and suppliers. So a method that is existing that Castlemaine 500 are already using is tracking participation in workshops and household energy audits. What could be some different ways that you could, what are some new methods that you could assist with answering this question and also trying to find out the information that you need to know from those measures?
Here again, we have to do the investigation to know about the number of household involved in the program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we know that there's 500 households involved in the program,
Yes, so
the Castlemaine 500. So
yeah.
how would you do that investigation? How would you collect data against that?
So again, we have to give them the investigation form to fill different information. For example, how they find the effective of engagement in the program. I mean, the maybe not all of them will fill down the form. 50% or 80%, for example, they will find the effective of engagement in the program.
When you say investigation form, do you mean like a survey? Is that?
Yeah, kind of survey. So in this survey form, we can put different information like how effective or what is benefit of engage the program. Do they agree about the method we are focusing on, something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can understand, from the survey workshop participants, I guess, perhaps.
Yeah, right.
And understand if they are renters or homeowners, if they've participated in that audit, and if they've engaged with other partners or suppliers.
Yeah. So in this point, I think interview is also necessary to get better, because interview kind of face-to-face information. So sometimes it's useful.
Yeah, for sure, especially a wide range of participants across the program.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, you are welcome. Thanks.
Any other suggestions?
Okay, Chef Tina has asked a question.
Mm-hmm.
She's asked it to me, but I think it's probably useful to explain to everybody. Could you elaborate on what tracking participation in workshops and household energy audits mean? Like, what are the specific measures?
So I guess from my understanding of the program, so Castlemaine 500 participants, there were 500 different households involved, and to be a part of the program, they agreed to participate in workshops around reducing household energy usage, as well as also participating in a household energy audit, which looked at the amount of appliances, how they were using their energy, at what times, was the peak or the low times of the day that they were using the energy the most or the least. So it's just making sure it's tracking those participants along the length of the 2-year period that the program was running.
Yeah, and I think why that's important is that we believe that tracking that participation is a bit of an indicator. So high levels of participation is a bit of an indicator, potential indicator of commitment to the outcomes and intent of the program, and especially participating in energy audits. So that would help us understand. It's a good way of understanding, or making getting a bit of an understanding of the the sustainability of the outcomes of the program.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Leanne and Keisha. Yeah, so just on that That's why I wanted to know, because like tracking participation, does that also include their feedback, the feedback of participants? If not, then that can also be a new,
Yeah.
the feedback of the participants, you know, like, yeah, aside from what they explain during,
not just tracking that they have turned up and the numbers,
but just to get like an honest opinion or a feedback from them regarding,
it should, tracking attendance, I guess, is that what that really means.
Okay, right,
isn't it?
okay.
Yeah, that's, but what you're saying is attendance is only part of the story, right? And
Yes,
yeah,
but to get what they actually feel and think about the project and the outcome.
That's right, absolutely. So here they're saying participation is attendance is a bit of a proxy for how good our engagement is. But you're right, people can turn up to something but not feel very engaged, or not find the engagement good, the engagement exercise. There's a few other suggestions that have popped in, Keisha, so people are getting a lot more engaged in potential methods. So Ellison said send questions to participants online, which I guess would be part of the survey of workshop participants. Ali said semi-structured interviews to judge the level of engagement among the partners. So you could survey for breadth and understand levels of engagement through that. You could also then follow up with interviews to complement the survey. Would give you more understanding, a bit more depth of information about engagement, a little bit more about the why it was good or not so good, whereas the surveys can be quite limited with that. And then Pinon said key informant interviews. So again, interviews by residents who joined the leadership program using semi-structured instrument with open-ended question about the program's effectiveness. And Santita said focus group discussion with different groups of households separately to see how effective they understand the leadership program.
Great.
Thank
you. Yeah, lots of suggestions. Good suggestions, everyone. Thank you. All right, lucky last is the question on learning. So the key evaluation question here is, what did we learn about what worked for who, in what situations, and why? So a lot of information there. And our sub-questions here in this instance is, what sorts of changes in behaviour led to more or less reductions in energy? And the second question is, where there are any patterns in those who were successful in reducing their energy consumption. I think that's supposed to say, were there any patterns in those who were successful in reducing their energy consumption? So what were the factors that assisted there? So Castlemaine 500 has been collecting the data from household energy bills from the electricity companies for each participating household, as well as the average energy usage from other nearby towns as a comparison. So what could you have as a potential new method to assist in collecting information against these questions?
So may I have my idea? So at this point, maybe let's learn from successful participants, like sharing knowledge about successful lessons, something like that.
Yeah. How would you collect that information?
Individual interview, or again survey, or can we open the workshop, like clothing workshop for this program, something like that? To know to get information from lesson learned from the different participants.
Yeah, good suggestions.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else Any other suggestions that are coming through, Leanne?
Yes, Hua says data from transforming workshops / community meetings. Ali said secondary sources to get data. And Pinon said the MSC method to capture changes on behaviour, common practices, etc.
Yeah, that's great.
And Annie is getting very fancy and suggested that we could do trend analysis on the household energy bill data clustered by particular household characteristics.
Yeah, that's a good one. In terms of the patterns that you're looking at, that's a good one. Great. Okay, so thinking about this information here, I'm just going to share my other screen now. I'm not sure, that's probably not showing up, but it's actually just the page from the training this week around the checklist for the methodology. So just running through the checklist together based on what we've just collected, the data sources and stuff that we've collected together. We can run through this checklist just to see if you think that we've met the criteria, I guess, for our methodology and our data collection methods. So the first one being the selected methods are a set of sufficiently comprehensive to address your key evaluation questions. I think so, unless anybody else has any other queries about that. You know, we've got enough data collection methods to be able to answer our questions that we had. Yeah. If we have sufficient budget and the methodology is proportional to the task. Now, from memory, Castlemaine 500 had a very limiting budget. Do you remember the quantity, Leanne?
For the M&E?
For Castlemaine overall.
Oh, I think it was, oh gosh. No, I can't remember, but it wasn't a whole lot.
It wasn't a whole lot. So you can imagine the MEL component would have been quite small as well.
That's right.
So if you're running focus groups and interviews and surveys and a trend analysis, do you think that we have enough budget to be able to do all of those activities, is my question. Feel free, I can see some of the chat now. Feel free to type into the chat if you're unable to speak there, Alison. And also keeping in mind, I think Castlemaine 500 only had 2 or 3 project team members, and they would have been responsible for the MEL as well. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? No, I might skip to the next one. You haven't introduced too many new methods that might overwhelm your team. There were a lot of new methods there. So maybe there is a way that we could condense those or use the same method across different questions to be able to make sure that we're not overwhelming the team of 3 people who are also in project delivery. The methods are set triangulate different perspectives. Leanne, I think that you mentioned before that they provide a bit of a breadth as well as that depth in terms of you can survey the amount of people, but then also get the depth or the richness, kind of understanding the why through interviews or like focus groups or the most significant change method as well. The data will arrive in time for you to be able to use some of it to adapt. So you're collecting it quite regularly and collecting it on time. It's not going to be something that's going to happen, you know, in 5 years' time when the program's actually only has a 2-year time period. And the right balance of qualitative and quantitative methods is consistent with the evaluation approach, which I believe Castlemaine 500 advocated for a mixed methods approach, in that they wanted to collect numbers as well as stories. So it seems like that we would be able to get a balance there. Just looking at the chat now, so refining the best methods based on the budget available and the suitability of the context, for sure. And then also the capacity of the team to carry out the data collection analysis might be worth considering. Absolutely. So I might just share that screen again of the MEL framework so we can just have a look and revisit. I would encourage you to unmute if you can. What are some things based on that checklist that you might change from our new methods that we've started to collect? Any suggestions?
Hi, Keisha. Can I say
Hi.
something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess with regards to checklist number 5, I think if we use the methods that would takes a lot of time to do it, you know, even for the preparations, like in the survey, we have to develop a questionnaires, and sometimes we have to do the trials, you know, for the questionnaires, and then the data collections and data entry, and then data analysis. I think that would be like, you know, probably probably the data would not be arrived on time, you know, when we are supposed to already analyzing it, and also probably that will be very expensive as well to do the survey. So maybe we should find, you know, alternate methods
To a certain.
yeah.
Sure thing. Thank you. Thanks for the suggestion.
And but I have a questions. Usually, I mean, most of the, you know, the criterias here would be would be benefiting from having before and after data, kind of, you know, baseline data. So how we could really make sure to have that? Should it be in the design of the MEL to begin with? So we, you know, we would be like having those kind of data to compare the before and after data baseline.
Yeah, that's a good point. Leanne, I think a couple of weeks ago you might have touched a little bit on baseline information. Are you able to assist with this question here?
Yeah. What I'll talk about it generally, but then help me get to the specifics of this question, this instance. So I guess what I was saying is that people have a natural inclination to think that if they want to measure change, they have to do a baseline at the beginning of a program. And what sometimes happens is, if particularly in instances where we're not exactly sure how change is going to happen and how change occurs, emerges, often the baseline that we collected at the beginning of the program turns out to be not very useful. And because they can be costly, it is sometimes better to really target, and we'll use this example, people who you want to understand for whom change occurred, and actually ask them what has changed for them, so that what you do is when you speak to them, you are basically retrospectively collecting the baseline. You're understanding the quantum of change from talking to them at one point in time, because they can tell you what it was like before and what it's like now. So that was the comment I was making previously that you're referring to, Keisha. But what was the question in this specific instance related to that?
I think it was just the suggestion that, like, for Castlemaine 500, would you need to build into the MEL, so into this diagram here, the need to have a baseline to collect pre and post information along the way?
Around electricity, around energy use?
Yeah, specifically, particularly if you want to measure the behavioral change, right?
Oh,
Yes,
right.
yeah, we could ask them, as what you just mentioned, about but sometimes we need a comparison as well, to understand whether they give like more objective response or not, because they
Yeah,
claim
yeah.
they could claim what they to what we would like to hear, so they just made it up in a way. So how, yeah, I mean, if you have a baseline, I mean, particularly if you have like not this particularly in this the specific case study that we are using, but for the other project, with like a long-term project, you may want to use this, but sometimes it's not being embedded in the design of MEL, right? So
Yeah. I don't know about a baseline here for this one, because people were given the options. They had their own audits. They had audits done of their houses and how they specifically use energy in their house, and then the changes that were suggested through that. So each household had its own little plan. And so for some people, it would have been things like, you can imagine a family that's got several students who are, several children who are studying, and they've got a desk in their bedroom, and they've got the light on for a couple of hours every night on the desk because they're studying. And it's not practical to bring the children all together to sit in one room and study, or examples of that. Whereas other households wouldn't have had that scenario. So there would have been very specific ways around how people could have change their energy use based on their own unique lifestyles. And so I don't know if a baseline would have had to be very specific to every single household to start with. The audit, in a way, does form a bit of a baseline. The audit understands how each individual household is currently using energy, and then the implementation of the program, their particular plan for their household would have focused on those things. And so the post participation survey would have asked questions like, instead of saying, did you change this or did you change this, it would have asked whether people had changed their behaviours in line with their own individual household energy consumption reduction plan. So in that way, it doesn't really lend itself. There is a baseline built into it, if you like, but it wouldn't have been that we want to measure everyone's use of this and that beforehand, assuming everyone's going to make the similar sort of changes, because we've been very household specific. Yeah.
okay.
But also, too, I think we should, when we think about bias, I mean, the other thing I would say is, what motivation would anyone have in an anonymous survey to make different claims? Because it's not like they're going to benefit from making anything up. So I'm not sure why. I mean, I can understand if there might be in some programs incentives for people to give information that's not entirely accurate, but I think a lot of the time there is no incentive to do that, and so why would people is they're not going to benefit from saying they changed their behaviours more than they actually did. It's actually they themselves who benefit by reduced energy bills. So I think we also need to be aware. Of course, there's bias in how people can respond to some surveys, but here I don't think there would be any real motivation to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Just looking at the time now, I think we might just move straight into some breakout groups, just to have a bit of a reflection. So everyone's in pairs or a group of 3, as well as one group of 3. So if you can go to the respective slide, as we'd all be familiar with now. So the breakout group 1, going to group 1 slide, and so on and so forth. So we're just wanting to capture, has there been any insights about methods that you have learnt over the past couple of weeks in this course? And then if there are anything that if there is anything, sorry, that you are still unsure about as well. Any questions that you might have, something that, you know, just doesn't quite make sense to you, and we'll do our best to answer them when we come back. So everybody's got 10 minutes for this exercise. I'll bring you back in about 10 minutes, and then we'll have 5 minutes at the end to discuss any outstanding questions. And if we don't get to all the questions, we can type them up in a follow-up email as well. All right, I'm opening the groups now, and I'll see you all soon. Just going to start the recording again there now. So thank you so much for your insights. I think everyone's quite similar in terms of understanding or now knowing that there are so many methods available that they could use for evaluation and data collection. I think if you're able to print off or keeping that resource that we gave you, that PDF last week, as a bookmark, it's probably a good one to keep a hold of. Making sure that you're kind of aligning your methods with your budget and your scope, and making sure they align with your key evaluation questions. So they were some of the key insights there. In terms of some of the questions, I think they were also quite similar as well. Just having a look there. I'm going to ask some questions to Leanne, and what we can't answer today, we'll make sure that we'll answer them offline. So one of the questions is, can we change the method in the middle of a project?
Yes, you can. And that's another thing why people get nervous. If they're taking a baseline, they feel like they need to keep the method going. So you should be using methods that are actually useful to you. You would want to change a method where you know it's actually not going to be that useful. So it sometimes means that you will no longer possibly use some of the data you've already collected using that method. And obviously you're making a choice about what would be more useful. So I would say you should use whatever is most useful for you, and sometimes that might mean dropping one method over another, and that's okay as long as you're getting what you need, because the whole point of this data collection exercise is to get the information you need to make better decisions about your own project.
Thanks, Leanne. Other questions are around, so how do you know which is the right method for your key evaluation question or what you're wanting to know? How do you know which method to pick when you have so many to choose from?
Yeah, it's hard. And what do we mean by right? I think that there's definitely no one right method, but there are methods that are more useful than others, more appropriate than others. And it comes back to those few key principles we talked about, maybe it was last week, in choosing methods, and that's understanding the time they're going to take, how much it's going to cost to implement them, what skill level is required, and also what biases are going to be introduced by those methods, and what level of rigor is expected with your data collection from potentially a funder. So you need to consider all of those things and say, for this example, I think it's sufficient that we only collect data using this method. And other times you're going to have to think more broadly than that. So I know it's really annoying when the answer is it depends, but it really does depend on the context of your project, how much money you have, how many human resources you have, how skilled they are at data collection, and what is the right level of rigor in this particular instance.
That's great, Leanne. Thank you. And I've just noticed we have 1 minute to go, so probably not enough time for another question. But I think we've kind of captured most of the questions. I think there are still things that people are still really foggy about or a bit unsure about. And my suggestion there is just to go back and have a look through the material and just absorb like the different technical terms that we've been using. And we've also got those supplementary resources in there as well to be able to identify that. So we actually ran through the type of activity that you were supposed to do with your project groups today. So if you are one of the groups that are doing Castlemaine 500, well, that's very lucky. But for those who aren't, then you'll have to go back and do that with your project groups in terms of what you're looking at for your assignment. And next week is our last session on the E in MEL. And the reason why I've purposely left the questions about analysis that were in those statements is because next week we're looking at data analysis and data weaving. So keep all those questions there for next week, and hopefully we'll be able to answer them there as well. But for that, we might leave it there. Have a really great week, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Okay.